My name is Eliza Marie Rushing, and I'm 31 years old. What I'm about to tell you happened 6 months ago, but the pain still feels fresh, like a wound that refuses to heal. Some betrayals cut so deep that they change you forever, and this is one of those stories. I was standing in my childhood bedroom, staring at an empty closet where my wedding dress should have been hanging. The custom-made gown that had taken 8 months to create cost me $4,000 and represented everything I'd dreamed of for my perfect day, gone. Just gone. Mom? I called out, my voice trembling. Where's my dress? The silence that followed was deafening. Then I heard footsteps, slow and hesitant, coming up the stairs. My mother appeared in the doorway, her face pale and her hands wringing together like she was trying to wash away guilt. Eliza, honey, we need to talk. Those 5 words. In that moment, I knew my life was about to implode. I sold it, she whispered, not meeting my eyes. I sold your wedding dress. The room spun. I gripped the door frame to keep from falling. You what? Madison needed the money for her wedding. You know how tight things have been since your father's surgery. She found a buyer online, Anne. Madison? My sister's name came out like a curse. Madison needed my wedding dress money? That's when the Repay bomb dropped. She's getting married next month, Eliza. To Ryan. Ryan. My ex-fiancé. The man I'd bought that dress to marry 3 years ago, before he left me for my younger sister. The betrayal hit me in waves. First, the dress. Then, the money. Finally, the twisted family loyalty that prioritized Madison's happiness over my heart, my memories, my very soul. If you've ever felt betrayed by the people closest to you, hit that like button. This story gets so much worse before it gets better. My legs gave out. I sank to the floor of my childhood bedroom, surrounded by faded posters and participation trophies, feeling smaller than I had since I was 10 years old. The dress wasn't just fabric and lace, it was hope. It was the symbol of the future I'd planned before everything fell apart. How could you? The words came out as a whisper, but they carried the weight of 31 years of being second best. Mom crouched down beside me, her eyes finally meeting mine. Honey, you've been single for 3 years. We didn't think you'd ever use it? I finished, the rage building like a pressure cooker about to explode. You didn't think I'd ever get married again? That's not what I meant. But her face said otherwise. I stood up, my hands shaking with fury. Get out. Eliza. Get out. She left, closing the door softly behind her, as if being gentle now could somehow undo the violence of what she'd done. I was alone with the empty closet and the crushing realization that my own family saw me as a lost cause. The spinster daughter whose dreams could be sold to fund the golden child's happiness. But they had no idea what they'd just unleashed. 3 years ago, when Ryan broke our engagement 2 months before the wedding, I'd been devastated. When he started dating Madison 6 weeks later, I'd been destroyed. When they moved in together, I'd learned to live with the constant ache of betrayal. But this? Selling my wedding dress to fund their union? This was war. I pulled out my phone and dialed my lawyer's number. If my family wanted to play dirty, I'd show them just how dirty things could get. That dress was my property, sold without my consent. And Madison? Well, Madison was about to learn that some debts come with interest. As I waited for Sarah Kellerman to pick up, I walked to my bedroom window and looked down at the house next door, the same house where Madison and Ryan were probably planning their perfect life together. They thought they'd won. They thought I was weak, broken, someone they could steamroll without consequences. They were about to find out how wrong they were. Sarah Kellerman Law Office, how can I help you? Sarah, it's Eliza rushing. I need you to stop what you're doing. My family just stole from me, and I'm about to make them pay every single cent. The smile that spread across my face felt foreign, sharp, dangerous. Let the games begin. Growing up as Madison Rushing's older sister was like living in a shadow that somehow managed to eclipse the sun itself. 2 years separated us in age, but it might as well have been a lifetime. Where Madison was petite and blonde with sparkling blue eyes that made strangers stop in grocery stores to tell my parents how beautiful she was, I was tall and awkward with mousy brown hair and a face that people described as interesting when they were being kind. But the real difference wasn't physical, it was in how our parents saw us. I remember being 8 years old, coming home from school with a perfect report card. All A's, a handwritten note from my teacher about my exceptional reading skills, and a gold star sticker that I'd been saving to show Mom and Dad. I burst through the front door, practically vibrating with excitement. Mom! Dad! Look at my report card! Mom was in the living room, braiding 6-year-old Madison's hair while she practiced for her dance recital. Madison was wearing a pink tutu, spinning in circles, looking like something out of a fairy tale. That's wonderful, sweetie, Mom said without looking up from Madison's perfect blonde curls. Madison, remember to point your toes when you spin. I stood there holding my report card, watching my parents beam at Madison's pirouettes, and felt something cold settle in my chest. It wasn't that they didn't love me, they did, in their distracted, dutiful way. But Madison? Madison lit up their entire world. That pattern continued for the next 23 years. When I made honor roll, Madison won the school talent show. When I got my driver's license, Madison got asked to homecoming by the captain of the football team. When I graduated valedictorian, Madison was crowned prom queen. Every achievement I earned was somehow overshadowed by something Madison simply was. You're so lucky to have Madison as a sister, people would tell me. She's going to take you under her wing when you get to high school. Lucky. As if basking in someone else's glow was a privilege instead of a punishment. Don't get me wrong, I loved Madison. How could I not? She was genuinely sweet, naturally charming, and never seemed to try to upstage me. It just happened, the way rain falls or flowers bloom. Effortless and inevitable. But loving someone who effortlessly takes everything you want is like holding fire, beautiful to look at, but it burns. College was my escape. For hours away at State University, I finally found out who I was when I wasn't Madison Rushing's older sister. I studied business, made my own friends, dated without being compared to the prettier sister back home. For 4 years, I was just Eliza, not the smart one, not the responsible one, just me. That's where I met Ryan. He was a junior when I was a senior, studying engineering with thick-rimmed glasses and a shy smile that made my stomach flip. We met in the library during finals week, both of us surviving on coffee and stress, and somehow started talking about everything except our textbooks. Ryan was different from the guys I'd dated in high school. He listened when I talked. He laughed at my jokes. He looked at me like I was the most interesting person in the room, not like he was waiting for my prettier sister to walk in. We dated for 6 months before I brought him home for Sunday dinner. I should have known better. I should have seen the danger signs. But I was 22 and in love, and love makes you believe in fairy tales even when you've lived your whole life in the villain's shadow. Ryan fit into my family like he'd been born into it. He complimented Mom's cooking, talked sports with Dad, and played video games with Madison, who was home from her freshman year at the private college she'd gotten a full scholarship to because she was well-rounded. "I like him," Madison told me that night, flopping onto my bed like she used to when we were kids. "He's really sweet, Eliza. And he obviously adores you." I should have paid attention to the way she said it, wistful, almost surprised, like she couldn't quite understand what Ryan saw in me. After graduation, I got a job at a marketing firm in the city and Ryan transferred to finish his degree closer to me. We moved in together, adopted a cat named Einstein, and talked about marriage like it was inevitable. Ryan was my first real love, the first person who chose me over Madison without even meeting her first. 2 years later, he proposed on my 24th birthday, in the same restaurant where we had our first official date. He got down on one knee right there between the appetizers and the main course, presenting me with my grandmother's engagement ring that he'd secretly asked Dad for permission to use. "Eliza Marie Rushing," he said, his voice shaking with nerves, "you're my best friend, my partner, my everything. Will you marry me?" I said yes through tears of joy, thinking this was my happy ending. Finally, something that was completely mine. We set the wedding date for October 15th, 18 months away to save money and plan everything perfectly. I threw myself into wedding planning with the same intensity one brought to everything else, determined to have one day where I was the center of attention, where everyone's eyes were on me for all the right reasons. The dress was the most important part. I must have tried on 50 gowns before I found the one, ivory silk with intricate pearl beadwork and a cathedral train that made me feel like a princess. It cost $4,000, more than I'd ever spent on anything, but this was my wedding. My one chance to be the beautiful one, the glowing one, the girl everyone couldn't stop looking at. I put it on layaway and spent 8 months making payments, picking it up just 6 weeks before the wedding. It hung in my closet like a promise, like proof that dreams could come true if you worked hard enough and waited long enough. Everything was perfect. The venue was booked, the flowers were ordered, the invitations were sent. Ryan and I were so happy that sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night just to make sure it wasn't all a dream. But dreams don't always have happy endings. The first crack in my perfect world appeared 2 months before the wedding. I came home early from work with a stomach bug and found Ryan's car in our driveway. That wasn't unusual, he had a key and often stopped by when I wasn't there to pick up mail or check on Einstein. But when I walked through the front door, I heard voices coming from the living room. Not just voices, laughter. Ryan's deep chuckle and another laugh I'd know anywhere. Madison was sitting on our couch, her legs tucked under her, wearing one of those effortless sundresses that made her look like sunshine. Ryan was on the other end of the sofa, but they were both leaning forward, heads close together, talking in the intimate way that people do when they're sharing secrets. "Oh!" Madison jumped up when she saw me, smoothing down her dress. "Eliza! I thought you were at work." "I came home sick," I said, looking between them. "What are you doing here, Maddie?" "Ryan called me," she said, shooting him a quick glance. "He wanted to surprise you for your birthday next week, and he needed help picking out a present." My birthday wasn't for another 3 weeks, but I didn't correct her. Something about the scene felt off, like walking into a movie theater in the middle of a film and trying to figure out what you'd missed. "That's sweet," I said, forcing a smile. "What did you decide on?" They exchanged another look, and Ryan cleared his throat. "It's a surprise, babe. Madison has great taste, she's helping me pick out jewelry." Jewelry. For my birthday that wasn't for 3 weeks. I went to bed that night with a strange knot in my stomach that had nothing to do with being sick. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing things. Ryan's phone would buzz with texts that he'd quickly dismiss. Madison would call our apartment more often, asking to speak to Ryan about wedding planning stuff even though she wasn't involved in planning the wedding. Ryan would volunteer to drive Madison places when her car was in the shop, coming home hours later than necessary with vague explanations about traffic. But I pushed down my suspicions because I loved him, and because Madison was my sister, and because I'd spent my whole life being the paranoid one, the jealous one, the sister who couldn't trust that good things could happen to her. Until the night I found them together. It was a Thursday, 6 weeks before my wedding. I was supposed to be at my final dress fitting, but the seamstress had called in sick and rescheduled for the next day. Instead of calling Ryan to tell him I'd be home early, I decided to surprise him with takeout from his favorite Thai restaurant. I used my key to let myself into our apartment quietly, planning to sneak up on him while he was watching TV. But the living room was dark, and I could hear voices coming from our bedroom. Ryan's voice, low and tender, "Are you sure about this?" And Madison's voice, breathy and sweet, "I've never been more sure of anything." I stood in our hallway, holding bags of Thai food, as my world collapsed around me. The bedroom door was cracked open just enough for me to see them on the bed we bought together, wrapped around each other like they'd done this 1,000 times before. Madison's blonde hair spread across my pillows. Ryan's hands tangling in her hair like he'd never touched me that way. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. I didn't burst in and demand explanations. I just stood there and watched the two people I loved most in the world destroy my life with every kiss, every whispered endearment, every moment of intimacy that should have been mine. Finally, I backed away, left the Thai food on the kitchen counter, and drove to my parents' house, where I sat in their driveway for 2 hours trying to figure out how to breathe again. When I finally went home that night, Ryan was alone, watching TV in his boxers like nothing had happened. "Hey babe," he said without looking up. "How was the fitting?" "Cancelled," I said. "The seamstress was sick." "That sucks." "Tomorrow then?" "Yeah. Tomorrow." I went to bed that night lying next to the man who was cheating on me with my sister, and I said nothing. Because part of me, the part that had spent 30 years coming in second, wasn't surprised. Part of me had been waiting for this my entire life. The confrontation came 3 days later, when I couldn't pretend anymore. I walked into our bedroom and found Ryan packing his suitcase. "Going somewhere?" I asked. He looked up, and I saw guilt written all over his face. "Eliza, we need to talk." "I know about Madison." His shoulders sagged like I'd cut the strings holding him up. "I'm sorry. I never meant for this to happen." "How long?" "Eliza." "How long, Ryan?" He sat down on the edge of our bed, and put his head in his hands. 3 months. 3 months. A quarter of a year of lies, of family dinners where I felt grateful for my perfect life, of wedding planning while my fiancé fell in love with my sister. "Do you love her?" I asked. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. "Yes," he whispered finally. "I'm sorry, Eliza. I love her. Not I made a mistake or I'll end it or I choose you. Just I love her." Those 3 words ended everything. The engagement was broken that night. The wedding was cancelled. The deposits were lost. And I was left standing in the rubble of my life, holding a wedding dress I would never wear, watching my sister and my fiancé build their happiness on the ashes of my dreams. But the real betrayal, the one that would cut deepest of all, was still coming. Because selling my dress to pay for their wedding? That wasn't the end of Madison's plan. It was just the beginning. 3 years passed after Ryan left me for Madison. 3 years of rebuilding my life from the ground up, of learning how to trust again, of trying to convince myself that I was more than just the sister who got left behind. I threw myself into work, got promoted twice, and bought a condo across town where I could start fresh. I dated occasionally but never seriously. How could I trust anyone when the person who knew me best had chosen someone else? Madison and Ryan moved in together after 6 months. They got engaged after a year and a half, with Ryan proposing at the same restaurant where he proposed to me, using the same speech about best friends and everything. I know this because Madison called me, breathless with excitement, to share every detail. "I know it's complicated," she said, "but I really want you to be happy for us, Eliza. We didn't plan for this to happen." Happy for them. As if I should celebrate my sister wearing my life like a costume that fit her better. But I tried. God help me, I tried to be the bigger person. I attended their engagement party, smiled through their couple's shower, and even helped Madison address wedding invitations because your handwriting is so much prettier than mine. I thought I was healing. I thought I was moving on. I had no idea I was being played. The first sign something was wrong came 2 months ago, when I got a call from my credit card company about suspicious activity on my account. "Ms. Rushing, we're calling about several large charges in Ohio. Did you recently spend $3,000 at a medical facility in Columbus, Ohio, where Madison lived now with Ryan?" "No, I've never been to Ohio," I said, my stomach dropping. "Those aren't my charges. We'll freeze the card immediately and start a fraud investigation. You should receive your new card in 7 to 10 business days." I hung up, shaken but not yet understanding the scope of what was happening. Identity theft happens to millions of people every year. It was probably just a random criminal who'd stolen my information. Except the charges kept coming. Over the next 2 months, I received bills for medical procedures I never had, prescriptions I never filled, and services I never used. All in Ohio. All requiring detailed personal information that only someone close to me would know: my social security number, my mother's maiden name, my childhood address. I started documenting everything, creating a file of fraudulent charges and fake bills. The amounts were getting bigger. $2,000 for physical therapy. $5,000 for diagnostic tests. $8,000 for a minor surgical procedure. Someone was living a very expensive life using my identity. That's when I called Tyler Morrison, a guy I'd dated briefly who worked in tech forensics. If anyone could figure out who was stealing from me, it would be Tyler. "Eliza, this isn't random identity theft," he said after reviewing my file. "This is systematic, organized, and personal. Whoever's doing this knows you intimately." "What do you mean?" "They're not just using your credit cards. They're using your medical history, your insurance information, even details from your therapy sessions after the breakup. This person knows things about you that only family or close friends would know." My blood went cold. "Tyler, all of these charges are in Ohio." "I know. I'm already tracking the locations. Every single fraudulent charge happened within a 15-mile radius of Columbus." "Want to guess who else lives in Columbus?" I didn't need to guess. I already knew. But Tyler wasn't done. "There's more, Eliza." I did some digging into the medical facilities involved. These aren't random clinics, they're high-end cosmetic surgery centers, fertility clinics, and luxury wellness spas. Someone's been getting very expensive elective procedures under your name and insurance. The room spun. "Are you saying I'm saying someone has been systematically using your identity to pay for their own medical treatments. And based on the types of procedures and the timeline, I think your sister has been preparing for her wedding using your credit and your insurance for the past year. The betrayal was so complete, so calculating, that I couldn't process it at first. Madison hadn't just stolen my fiancé and my family's support. She'd been stealing my actual identity to fund her perfect new life. But how? How would she get all my personal information? Tyler was quiet for a moment. Eliza, do you remember giving Ryan your social security number for anything? Insurance forms, maybe, or when you were living together. I did remember. When we were engaged, Ryan had handled adding me to his health insurance at work. I'd given him all my personal information, social security, insurance numbers, even my login information for various accounts because I trusted him completely. He kept everything, I whispered. Ryan kept all my information and gave it to Madison. That would be my guess. But there's something else you need to know. I found records of Madison calling your doctors, your insurance company, even your old therapist, impersonating you to get information. Dr. Patricia Williams. The therapist I'd seen after the breakup to work through the depression and betrayal. Madison had been calling her, pretending to be me, gathering information about my mental health. Why would she need that? Tyler's voice was grim. I think she's been building a case to have you declared mentally incompetent, Eliza. If she could prove you were unstable, she could challenge your grandmother's trust fund. Grandma Rose's trust. I'd forgotten about it, $150,000 that would come to me when I turned 35 in 4 years. Madison was only entitled to it if something happened to me or if I was declared unfit to manage money. She's been planning this for years, I said, the pieces falling into place. The affair, the engagement, the manipulation, it was all designed to make me look unstable so she could steal my inheritance. And the dress theft was the final piece, Tyler said. She needed you to react in a way that seemed vindictive and irrational. Filing lawsuits over a dress would fit perfectly into her narrative that you're mentally unbalanced. I thought about all the phone calls I'd received after I filed the lawsuit. Family members, friends, even people I barely knew, all telling me I was being unreasonable, that I needed help, that I was obsessed with Madison and couldn't let go of the past. Madison hadn't just been turning people against me, she'd been systematically building a case for my incompetency. Tyler, I need you to keep digging. Find everything, every fake bill, every impersonation, every lie. I'm going to destroy her. Eliza, this is bigger than we thought. If Madison's been doing this to you, she might be doing it to other people too. This could be a federal case. Federal. As in FBI, prison time, serious consequences. Good. Madison wanted to play games with people's lives? It was time she learned what happened when the game turned against her. But first, I needed to spring the trap I'd been setting since the moment I found my empty closet. Because while Madison had been busy stealing my identity, I'd been busy documenting every single thing she'd stolen from me. And tomorrow, at her perfect wedding, she was going to learn that some debts come with compound interest. I called Sarah Kellerman. Sarah, it's Eliza. Remember that lawsuit over the dress? I need you to file criminal charges for identity theft, medical fraud, and conspiracy. And I need you to do it tomorrow morning, right before Madison walks down the aisle. Eliza, are you sure about the timing? This will destroy her wedding. I thought about Madison in my stolen dress, marrying my stolen fiancé, using my stolen identity to pay for her perfect life while systematically destroying my reputation and planning to steal my inheritance. That's the point, Sarah. Madison wants a wedding she'll never forget. I'm going to give her one. The smile that spread across my face was sharp as a blade. Tomorrow, Madison would learn what it felt like to have everything stolen from her. And this time, I wouldn't be the one left standing in the ruins. Madison's wedding day arrived gray and drizzly, as if even the weather knew something wicked was coming. I spent the morning at my salon getting ready, hair in an elegant updo, makeup flawless, nails painted blood red. I chose my outfit carefully, a stunning black dress that hugged my curves and made me look like power personified. If Madison wanted me at her wedding, I was going to make sure she remembered why that was a mistake. I arrived at the Riverside Hotel at 2 p.m., an hour before the ceremony. The same venue where Ryan and I were supposed to get married 3 years ago. Madison had booked it deliberately, another calculated twist of the knife. But today, that choice would work in my favor. The lobby was already bustling with guests. I recognized most of them, Madison's college friends, Ryan's family, neighbors, and relatives who'd been turned against me over the past few months through Madison's careful campaign of lies. But scattered throughout the crowd were my people too. Tyler was near the bar, looking sharp in his navy suit. Emma, who'd flown in from Seattle specifically for this moment, stood by the windows. Sarah Kellerman sat in the corner, her briefcase full of legal documents that would change everything. I signed the guest book with a flourish, wishing you everything you deserve. With love, Eliza. Then I took my seat in the third row, right where Madison would have a perfect view of me during the entire ceremony. The music started. Bridesmaids in pale pink walked down the aisle, their faces glowing with the kind of happiness that comes from believing in fairy tales. Ryan took his place at the altar, looking handsome in his black tuxedo, his eyes scanning the crowd until they found mine. I smiled and gave him a little wave. His face went pale. Then the wedding march began, and Madison appeared at the back of the aisle. In my dress. But she'd destroyed it completely. The intricate pearl beadwork had been replaced with cheap rhinestones that caught the light harshly. The elegant cathedral train had been chopped to a simple chapel length. The sophisticated neckline had been altered into something that belonged more in a nightclub than a church. She looked beautiful, Madison always looked beautiful, but she was wearing a butchered imitation of my dream dress. As she walked down the aisle, her eyes found mine. She smiled, a triumphant, vicious smile that said I won everything, and there's nothing you can do about it. I smiled back and pulled out my phone, typing a single text message to Sarah, now. The ceremony proceeded normally. Madison and Ryan exchanged vows about true love conquering all, about soulmates finding each other despite obstacles, about building a life together on the foundation of trust and honesty. I almost laughed at the irony. Then the minister reached the traditional words, if anyone has reason why these two should not be wed, speak now or forever hold your peace. I stood up. The entire ballroom went silent. 200 guests turned to stare at me, their faces ranging from confused to horrified. Madison's bouquet trembled in her hands. Eliza, don't. I have several reasons, actually, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the silent room. And I think everyone here deserves to know the truth about the bride and groom. I pulled out a folder of documents and held it up. First, the bride is currently under federal investigation for identity theft, medical fraud, and conspiracy. Gasps echoed through the ballroom. Ryan's best man stepped forward like he was going to intervene, but Tyler was already moving toward the altar from his position near the bar. Second, I continued, the groom has been systematically violating medical privacy laws and participating in organized fraud against multiple victims for the past 3 years. Madison's face was white as her stolen dress. That's not true. She's lying. Everyone knows Eliza's been unstable since you stole my fiancé and my identity? I interrupted. Since you've been using my credit cards and insurance to pay for your cosmetic procedures? Since you've been impersonating me to doctors and therapists to build a fake case for my mental incompetency? The room erupted in shocked murmurs. I saw my parents in the front row, their faces confused and horrified, finally beginning to understand the scope of what their golden child had become. Third, I said, my voice rising above the chaos, the bride is wearing a stolen wedding dress that she purchased from her own mother without the owner's consent, then destroyed through unauthorized alterations. It's just a dress. Madison screamed, her perfect wedding composure completely shattered. You've been single for 3 years. We didn't think you'd ever use it. Just a dress? I laughed, and the sound filled the silent ballroom. Madison, you've stolen over $40,000 from me using fraudulent medical claims. You've been planning to have me declared mentally incompetent to steal my inheritance. You've systematically destroyed my relationships and my reputation. The dress was just the final insult. That's when the doors at the back of the ballroom opened, and FBI agent Rebecca Torres walked in with 2 uniformed officers. The wedding guests turned in their seats like they were watching a tennis match, their heads swiveling between the FBI agents and the bride who was now backing away from the altar. Madison rose rushing in. Ryan James Mitchell, Agent Torres announced, her voice echoing through the ballroom, you're both under arrest for identity theft, medical fraud, conspiracy, and wire fraud. Madison made a run for it then, hiking up her ruined wedding dress and trying to flee toward the side exit. But Emma was already there, blocking her path with a smile that was all teeth. Going somewhere, sis? Emma asked sweetly. Madison spun around, looking for another escape route, but Tyler and Sarah had positioned themselves at the other exits. She was trapped in the center of her own wedding, surrounded by 200 guests who were now seeing her true nature for the first time. This isn't fair, she sobbed as the officers approached with handcuffs. Everything good always happens to Eliza first. She had you first, Ryan. She had the dress first. She was supposed to get the trust fund. It's not fair. And there it was. The truth, finally spoken out loud. Madison hadn't stolen from me because she needed money or because she loved Ryan more. She'd stolen from me because I'd had things first, and she couldn't stand being second at anything. Madison, I said quietly, walking closer to where she stood in her stolen, ruined dress, I never competed with you. I never tried to take anything from you. You were always Mom and Dad's favorite. You were always the princess. But it was never enough for you, was it? She collapsed then, sinking to the floor in a puddle of white silken rhinestones, sobbing hysterically as the handcuffs clicked around her wrists. Ryan didn't run. He just stood at the altar, his head in his hands, looking older than his 30 years. Why? I asked him as the officers read them their rights. We were happy, Ryan. We were building a life together. Why throw it all away? He looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. Because Madison made me feel like I was the most important person in the world. With you, I was just me. With her, I was special. The most honest thing he'd ever said to me, and the most heartbreaking. As the FBI led Madison and Ryan away in handcuffs, the wedding guests sat in stunned silence. Some of them, the ones who'd called me crazy and vindictive over the past few months, looked ashamed. Others looked angry that their perfect day out had been ruined. But I didn't care what any of them thought anymore. My parents approached me as the ballroom slowly emptied, their faces pale and shaken. Eliza, Mom whispered, we had no idea. We're so sorry. We failed you, Dad added, his voice rough with emotion. We should have seen what was happening. We should have protected you. I looked at these two people who'd raised me, who'd loved Madison more but never stopped loving me, who'd been manipulated just as thoroughly as everyone else. You were her victims too, I said. Madison fooled all of us. 6 months later, I'm sitting in my new apartment in Seattle, where Emma lives, reading the newspaper over Sunday morning coffee. Madison was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison for identity theft and fraud. Ryan got 3 years. They broke up 2 weeks after their arrest. Apparently, conspiracy wasn't a strong foundation for marriage. The insurance companies recovered most of the stolen money, and I got full restitution for the fraudulent charges. My credit was repaired, my reputation was cleared, and my inheritance was secure. My parents and I are in family therapy, slowly rebuilding our relationship and learning to address the favoritism patterns that poisoned our family for so long. Some weeks are better than others, but we're making progress. As for the dress, I donated it to a nonprofit that provides wedding gowns to women starting over after domestic violence. Someone else would walk down the aisle in those damaged and repaired beads, someone who understood that beautiful things could be restored even after they'd been broken. I'm 32 now, and I'm finally learning what it means to be the main character in my own story. Not the victim, not the villain, not the supporting actress in someone else's drama, just me, flawed and fierce and finally free. Last month, I started dating someone new. His name is Marcus, he's a marine biologist, and he has no idea who Madison is. When I told him about my family, he listened without judgment and said, "People who really love you don't steal your dreams to fund their own happiness." Simple words, but they changed something in me. The betrayal still hurts sometimes, late at night when the world is quiet and I remember how it felt to believe I was loved unconditionally. But betrayal taught me things that kindness never could. It taught me strength. It taught me boundaries. It taught me the difference between being nice and being respected. Madison stole my wedding dress, my fiancé, my identity, and 3 years of my peace of mind. But she also gave me something invaluable, the knowledge that I don't need anyone's approval to be worthy of love. I don't need to be the golden child to matter. I don't need to compete for space in my own life. I just need to be myself, unapologetically and completely. And that's something no one can ever steal from me. Madison thought she could take everything I had and make it hers. But what she never understood is that the most important things, self-respect, inner strength, the ability to start over, can't be stolen. They can only be earned. And I've earned them all. 2 years after Madison's wedding disaster, I thought I'd closed that chapter of my life forever. I was wrong. It was a rainy Thursday morning in November when everything changed again. I was in my Seattle apartment, getting ready for work, when my phone rang. The number wasn't in my contacts, but something about it seemed familiar. Hello? Eliza? It's Madison. My blood turned to ice. Madison was supposed to be in federal prison for another 3 years. How was she calling me? How are you? I'm out, she said quickly, her voice different than I remembered. Smaller. Broken. Early release for good behavior and overcrowding. I've been out for 2 weeks. I sank into my kitchen chair, my coffee growing cold in my hands. What do you want, Madison? I need to see you. There's something. God, Eliza, there's something you need to know. Something I should have told you years ago. I don't want to hear. Ryan's dead. The words hit me like a physical blow. Whatever anger I'd been prepared to feel evaporated instantly. What? He died 6 months ago. In prison. And before he died, he told me the truth about everything. Eliza, I need you to know that none of this was my idea. I couldn't breathe. Ryan was dead, and Madison was claiming innocence? After everything she'd put me through? Madison, I can't do this. Whatever game you're playing now. It's not a game. Her voice broke, and I heard something I'd never heard from my sister before, genuine desperation. Please, Eliza. Meet me somewhere public. 1 hour. I have proof of things that will change everything you think you know. Against every instinct, against all logic, I found myself agreeing to meet her at a coffee shop downtown. Madison looked nothing like the golden girl I remembered. Prison had aged her, made her thin and hollow-eyed. Her once perfect blonde hair was now a dull brown, pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore jeans and a plain sweater that looked like they came from a thrift store. When she saw me, tears immediately started streaming down her face. "Thank you for coming," she whispered. "I wasn't sure you would." "You have 30 minutes, I said, sitting across from her. "Talk." Madison pulled out a manila envelope and slid it across the table. Before Ryan died, he wrote me a letter confessing everything. He also gave me this. Inside the envelope were documents, photos, and what looked like pages from a journal. I recognized Ryan's handwriting immediately. "What is this?" "The truth," Madison said. "Ryan wasn't just my boyfriend, Eliza. He was my blackmailer." My hands froze over the papers. "What?" "It started when I was 19, in college. I was struggling with depression, failing classes, drinking too much. I made some really bad choices." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "There was a professor, Dr. Harrison. He offered me a way to pass his class in exchange for things I'm not proud of. I felt sick." "Madison." "Ryan found out about it. He had photos, recordings, everything. He said if I didn't help him get close to you, he'd release everything and destroy my future." The papers in my hands felt like they weighed 1,000 pounds. I looked down and saw photos of a young Madison with an older man, clearly compromising images that would have ruined her scholarship, her reputation, everything. "So you seduced him away from me because he was blackmailing you?" "No." Madison shook her head violently. "That's not how it happened. Ryan approached me first, at that family dinner when you brought him home. He said he'd been watching our family, researching us. He knew about Grandma Rose's trust fund from the beginning." My world tilted. "What are you saying?" "Ryan never loved you, Eliza. He targeted you specifically because of the inheritance. But when he learned about my situation with the professor, he realized I was more vulnerable. Easier to control. I started reading Ryan's letter, written in his familiar scrawl. Madison, if you're reading this, I'm probably dead. I need you to know that I'm sorry for everything I put you through. What started as a simple con to get access to your family's money turned into something much darker. I researched the Rushing family for months before I ever met Eliza. I knew about the trust fund, about the family dynamics, about which sister would be easier to manipulate. I chose Eliza first because she seemed lonely, eager for love. But when I discovered your secret, I realized you were the better target. I made you seduce me away from her. I made you steal from her. I made you destroy your relationship with your family. Every terrible thing you did, I forced you to do by threatening to release those photos. The identity theft, the medical fraud, the plan to have Eliza declared incompetent, all of that was my idea. You were just my puppet, and I pulled every string. I'm dying now, probably from what the other inmates did to me for being an identity thief. Who hurt women? I deserve it. But you don't deserve to carry this guilt anymore. Tell Eliza the truth. Tell her that you tried to stop me multiple times, and I threatened to hurt her physically if you didn't comply. Tell her about the suicide attempt you made when you couldn't take the guilt anymore. Tell her everything. I destroyed 2 sisters' lives because I was greedy and evil. Don't let me destroy what's left of yours. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the letter. Madison, is this true? She nodded, tears streaming down her face. Every word. Ryan made me call your doctors to get your medical information. He made me apply for credit cards in your name. When I tried to refuse, he'd show me those photos and remind me that he could destroy my life with one email. But you seemed so happy with him. At the wedding. I was acting. I had to act happy, or he'd hurt you. Ryan told me that if I ever tried to tell you the truth, he'd make sure something accidentally happened to you. I was terrified for your safety. I felt like I was drowning. Everything I thought I knew about the past 5 years was a lie. The suicide attempt Ryan mentioned. Madison's face crumpled. 3 months after we got engaged. I couldn't take the guilt anymore, knowing what we were doing to you. I took a bottle of pills and wrote you a letter explaining everything. Ryan found me and called an ambulance, but he destroyed the letter. He told everyone I had food poisoning. I remembered that incident. Madison had been sick for several days, and Ryan had been so attentive, so worried about her. I'd thought it was romantic. Why didn't you tell me this at the trial? Why let me think you masterminded everything? Because Ryan told me he'd kill you if I talked. Even after we were arrested, even in prison, he had connections. Inmates who owed him favors. I couldn't risk your life, Eliza. I'd rather spend my life in prison than have your death on my conscience. The coffee shop around us faded as I processed everything. My sister, who I'd hated for years, had actually been trying to protect me. Ryan, who I'd mourned as my lost love, had been a predator who'd targeted our entire family. Madison, I don't know what to say. Say you'll forgive me someday, she whispered. I know I can't undo the pain I caused you. I know saying I was being blackmailed doesn't excuse the fact that I hurt you. But maybe someday you'll understand that I never wanted any of this to happen. I looked at my sister, really looked at her for the first time in years. The golden girl was gone, replaced by a broken woman who'd spent years carrying guilt that wasn't entirely her own. Where are you living now? I asked. A halfway house downtown. I'm working at a grocery store, trying to rebuild my life. I'll never be the person I was before, and maybe that's good. That person was weak enough to let herself be manipulated. We sat in silence for a long time, the weight of revelation settling between us. I need time, I finally said. It's a lot to process. I understand. But Eliza? I want you to know that every day in prison, I thought about how brave you were at my wedding. How you stood up for yourself and demanded justice. I was so proud of you, even as they were putting handcuffs on me. Proud? You became the strong one. the one who fought back. You became everything I never had the courage to be. She stood up, gathering her things. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know the truth. As Madison walked away, I sat alone with Ryan's confession and a completely rewritten understanding of my own life. 6 months later, Madison and I meet every other week for coffee. We're not close, maybe we never will be again. But we're learning to be sisters in a new way, built on truth instead of competition. She's been attending therapy for trauma victims, working through years of manipulation and abuse. I've been learning that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and that sometimes the people who hurt us are hurting just as badly. My parents have welcomed Madison back cautiously, with boundaries and family therapy sessions. They're learning, like all of us, that golden children and scapegoats are just different types of victims when toxic people are involved. Marcus and I got engaged last month. Madison wasn't at the proposal, but she sent me a card that said simply, "I'm happy you found someone who loves you for you." Sometimes I think about Ryan and wonder if he was born evil or if life made him that way. Then I remember that it doesn't matter. What matters is that he's gone, his victims are healing, and the truth finally came to light. The dress I was supposed to wear to marry him is still helping other women start new chapters of their lives. Madison never asked for it back, and I never offered. Some things are better left transformed into something entirely new. I'm 33 now, and I finally understand that families are complicated, love is complicated, and truth is the most complicated thing of all. But I also understand that healing is possible, forgiveness is a choice, and strength can be found in the most unexpected places. Madison will always be my sister. She'll also always be the person who hurt me deeply, even if she wasn't the mastermind I thought she was. Both things can be true at the same time. And maybe that's the most grown-up thing I've ever learned. Life rarely gives us the clean endings we see in movies. Sometimes the villain turns out to be a victim too. Sometimes forgiveness is messier than revenge. Sometimes the truth changes everything, including how we see our own story. Have you ever learned something that completely changed your understanding of a painful situation? Have you had to forgive someone who hurt you, even when the circumstances were complicated? Share your story in the comments below, because real life is never as simple as we want it to be, and that's okay. Remember, healing doesn't require you to forget what happened. It just requires you to decide who you want to be going forward. And you get to make that choice every single day. 1 year after Madison's revelation about Ryan, I thought we'd finally found our new normal. I was wrong again. It started with a phone call from FBI agent Rebecca Torres, the same woman who'd arrested Madison and Ryan at their wedding 3 years earlier. "Eliza, I need you to come to the field office as soon as possible. We've discovered something about Ryan's death that changes everything." My heart sank. "What now?" "I can't discuss it over the phone, but I need both you and Madison present. This affects your entire family." 2 hours later, Madison and I sat across from Agent Torres in the same sterile conference room where I'd first learned the scope of Ryan's crimes. Madison looked as nervous as I felt, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Thank you both for coming," Agent Torres began, spreading a new set of documents across the table. 3 weeks ago, we received information from an inmate at the federal prison where Ryan died. He claims Ryan's death wasn't the result of prison violence. I felt cold all over. "What are you saying?" "We're saying Ryan Mitchell was murdered. And the person who ordered the hit is someone you both know very well." Madison grabbed my hand instinctively. "Who?" Agent Torres slid a photograph across the table. It was a surveillance photo of a woman I recognized immediately, though she looked different, older, thinner, with carefully styled gray hair. Dr. Patricia Williams. My former therapist. I don't understand, I said, staring at the photo. Dr. Williams is a therapist. What would she have to do with Ryan's death? Dr. Patricia Williams has been running a sophisticated identity theft and blackmail operation for over 15 years, Agent Torres explained. Ryan wasn't the mastermind, Eliza. He was middle management. The room spun around me. That's impossible. Dr. Williams used her therapy practice to gather sensitive information about vulnerable clients, then passed that information to operatives like Ryan who would target the clients' families. Your therapy sessions after the breakup gave her everything she needed to know about your family dynamics, your finances, and your psychological vulnerabilities. Madison's face was white. Are you saying she orchestrated everything? We believe Dr. Williams identified you as the perfect target because of your guilt over the affair and your family's obvious favoritism patterns. She instructed Ryan to manufacture the blackmail situation with your professor, then use that leverage to control you. I felt like I was going to vomit. The professor, that was fake. Agent Torres nodded grimly. Professor Harrison doesn't exist at your college. Never has. The photos Ryan showed you were created using AI technology and hired models. The entire blackmail scenario was fabricated to make you compliant. Madison doubled over like she'd been punched in the stomach. You're telling me that I destroyed my family, went to prison, and lived with guilt for years, over fake photographs? I'm telling you that you were the victim of one of the most sophisticated psychological manipulation schemes we've ever encountered. Dr. Williams has been perfecting these techniques for decades. I thought about my therapy sessions with Dr. Williams, how safe I'd felt telling her about my family, my fears, my deepest insecurities. She'd seemed so kind, so understanding. How many other people? I asked quietly. We've identified at least 40 families across 6 states who were targeted by her operation. The total financial damage is estimated at over $2 million. But why kill Ryan? Because Ryan got greedy. After you exposed him at the wedding, he started talking to federal investigators, trying to make a deal. Dr. Williams couldn't risk him revealing her involvement, so she had him eliminated. Agent Torres pulled out another file. There's more, I'm afraid. Dr. Williams didn't just target your family randomly. She had a personal connection to you. She slid another photograph across the table. This one was older, grainy, showing a young woman in a wedding dress standing next to a man I didn't recognize. This is Patricia Williams 35 years ago, at her wedding to Thomas Rushing. The name hit me like lightning. Rushing? But that's your father's brother. Patricia Williams is your aunt by marriage. Was, anyway. She and Thomas divorced after 2 years, and she went back to her maiden name. Madison and I stared at each other in shock. Our own aunt had orchestrated the systematic destruction of our family. Why? Madison whispered. Why would she do this to us? According to the inmates who've been talking, Dr. Williams blamed your father for the divorce. She claimed he turned Thomas against her, poisoned the family against her. This was her revenge, destroy his daughters' lives the same way she felt hers had been destroyed. The scope of the betrayal was so vast, so personal, that I couldn't process it. Every tragedy of the past 5 years, the affair, the breakup, the identity theft, the wedding disaster, Madison's imprisonment, all of it had been orchestrated by a woman I'd paid to help me heal. What happens now? I asked. Dr. Williams is in custody. She's been charged with conspiracy, racketeering, identity theft, and murder for hire. Her trial starts next month, and we'll need both of you to testify. And the other victims? We're working to contact all of them. There are families who've been torn apart for years, not knowing they were manipulated. Some marriages destroyed, some people who died thinking their children hated them. Agent Torres paused. Your family was lucky. You found your way back to each other. After the meeting, Madison and I sat in my car in the FBI parking garage, both of us too stunned to speak. Finally, Madison broke the silence. Eliza, I'm so sorry. For what? You were manipulated just like I was. For not being stronger. For not seeing through her lies. For not protecting you better. I looked at my sister, my complicated, imperfect sister who'd been carrying guilt that was never fully hers to carry. Madison, we were both victims. The only person who needs to apologize is in federal custody. Do you think? Madison's voice was small. Do you think we can ever really be okay? After everything? I thought about all the ways our family had been broken and rebuilt over the past few years. About parents learning to love more equally, about sisters learning to trust again, about the long process of healing from manipulation and trauma. I think we're already okay, I said. Different than before, but okay. 6 months later, I stood in the witness box at Dr. Williams' federal trial, looking directly at the woman who had destroyed so many lives. She looked smaller in her orange jumpsuit, older and more fragile. But when our eyes met, I saw no remorse there. Only anger that her plan hadn't worked perfectly. Dr. Williams used her position as a licensed therapist to weaponize the most intimate details of my life, I testified. She turned my pain into a roadmap for destroying my family. She created fake evidence to manipulate my sister, orchestrated crimes using my identity, and when her operative threatened to expose her, she had him killed. The defense attorney tried to paint Dr. Williams as a mentally ill woman who'd lost touch with reality. But the evidence was overwhelming: detailed records of her operations, financial documents showing her profits, recorded conversations with other operatives. Madison testified too, describing years of psychological manipulation and coercion. She spoke about the fake blackmail, the threats against my safety, the way Dr. Williams had exploited her guilt and family dynamics to turn her into an unwilling accomplice. When it was Dr. Williams' turn to speak, she showed no remorse. The Rushing family destroyed my marriage and my life, she said coldly. I simply returned the favor. The judge sentenced her to life in prison without parole. Walking out of that courthouse, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: complete closure. Today is my wedding day. The real one, this time. Madison is my maid of honor, standing beside me in a simple blue dress as Marcus and I exchange vows in my parents' backyard. It's a small ceremony, just family and close friends who know our whole story and love us anyway. My parents walk me down the aisle together, both of them crying. They've learned to share the spotlight, to celebrate both their daughters equally. Family therapy isn't magic, but it works if everyone commits to the process. My dress is new, a simple ivory gown I picked out myself, with no traumatic history attached to it. Marcus looks at me like I'm the most beautiful thing he's ever seen, and I know he means it because he's seen me at my worst and chose to stay anyway. During the ceremony, I catch Madison's eye and smile. She smiles back, genuine and warm. We're not the same people we were before Dr. Williams and Ryan entered our lives. We're better, stronger, more honest, more appreciative of what we have. In her maid of honor speech, Madison says something that makes everyone cry. My sister taught me that healing isn't about forgetting what happened to you. It's about choosing who you want to become in spite of what happened to you. Eliza could have let bitterness consume her, but instead, she chose love. She chose forgiveness. She chose to build a life so beautiful that the darkness couldn't touch it. Later, as Marcus and I dance our first dance as husband and wife, I see Madison sitting with our parents, all of them laughing at something Dad said. They look like a real family, imperfect, scarred, but real. Dr. Williams tried to destroy us by exploiting our weaknesses. What she didn't understand is that broken families can heal stronger than they were before if they're willing to do the work. Ryan tried to steal my happiness by targeting my vulnerabilities. What he didn't understand is that surviving manipulation teaches you to recognize and value genuine love. Madison made choices that hurt me deeply, even if she was coerced into making them. What she's learning is that earning forgiveness is possible, but it requires consistent actions over time, not just explanations. I'm 34 now, married to a man who loves me without conditions, reconciled with my family despite our complicated history, and working as a victim advocate helping other people navigate the aftermath of psychological manipulation and identity theft. Some nights I still wake up angry about the years that were stolen from us. But most mornings, I wake up grateful for the family we became in the rebuilding. Dr. Williams will spend the rest of her life in prison, surrounded by people who know exactly what she did to innocent families. Ryan is dead, his schemes exposed, his victims vindicated. Madison and I will spend the rest of our lives being sisters, not the sisters we were, but the sisters we chose to become. And that choice, that daily choice to love each other despite everything, is the best revenge we could ever have. Sometimes the people who hurt us most are the ones we trust to help us heal. Sometimes the truth is more complicated than any fiction we could imagine. Sometimes justice takes years to arrive, but when it does, it's worth the wait. Have you ever discovered that a situation you thought you understood was completely different from what it seemed? Have you had to rebuild trust with family members after manipulation or betrayal? Share your story in the comments below, because recovery from psychological manipulation is possible, but it's easier when you know you're not alone. Remember, you are not responsible for what others do to you, but you are responsible for what you choose to do with your healing. Choose love when you can. Choose boundaries when you need them. Choose to keep going, no matter how complicated the truth gets. And sometimes, just sometimes, choose to dance at your own wedding with the family that survived everything and came out stronger on the other side.